I've lived in the Gramercy for 6 years. That's not the building's real name. I don't think it ever had a real name, actually. It's one of those mid-rise brick places from the 70s that just has a street number bolted above the door in aluminum digits, half of them crooked. But somewhere along the way, someone started calling it the Gramercy. Maybe because of the faded green awning out front that looked like it belonged to a restaurant that never opened, and the name stuck the way things do in buildings like that. You just start saying it, and then everyone says it, and then it's real. I moved in with my brother, Dean, in 2018. We got the place because our aunt had lived there for 11 years before she moved to assisted living, and the landlord, this guy named Paul, short for something Polish I never learned to pronounce, gave us her rate. $740 a month for a one-bedroom on the 4th floor. In the city we lived in, that was almost a joke. A good joke. The kind you don't question. Dean's 3 years younger than me. 24 when we moved in. 27 now at the time of everything I'm about to tell you. He works overnights doing IT support for a hospital network, so his schedule is basically inverted. He leaves around 10 at night, gets back around 7 in the morning, sleeps until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I work a normal hours job doing accounts receivable for a flooring distributor. So we overlap in the apartment for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, mostly in the late afternoon and evening. It works. We're not on top of each other. We split groceries. He does dishes. I do laundry. It's not exciting. It's stable. After the way we grew up. And I won't get into all of that, but stable wasn't something either of us took for granted. The Gramercy has 8 floors, 6 units per floor. The buildings may be half occupied on a good month. Paul owns it outright. Inherited it from his father, and I don't think he's put real money into it since the Clinton administration. The elevator works about 60% of the time. The hallway carpet is this dark burgundy that might have been red once. The stairwells smell like old paint and the specific kind of dust that builds up in places where air doesn't move enough. But the walls are solid, the heat works, the water's hot. And Paul, for all his cheapness, answers his phone when something breaks, which is more than I can say for any landlord I've had before or since. The intercom system is original to the building. It's this panel by the front entrance, a glass door that locks automatically. With a row of buttons next to little label slots, you press someone's unit number, it buzzes their apartment. They pick up a handset mounted on the wall inside, and if they want to let you in, they press a button that releases the door lock. Simple. Most of the label slots are empty or have names from tenants who left years ago. Ours still says Kaminsky, which was my aunt's married name. I never bothered to change it, neither did Dean. You get used to things being slightly wrong in buildings like the Gramercy. It becomes part of the texture. For the first few years, nothing about the intercom was notable in any way. It buzzed when the mailman needed the door open for packages. It buzzed when Dean forgot his key, which happened maybe twice a year. Once, a DoorDash driver hit our button by accident, looking for 4B. That was the full history of our intercom usage from 2018 to early 2021. Unremarkable, a thing on the wall. The first time it happened, the first time that mattered, was a Wednesday in March of 2021. I know it was a Wednesday because I'd started doing this thing where I meal prepped on Wednesday nights. Chicken thighs, rice, whatever vegetables were cheap. I'd portion it out into those plastic containers and that would cover my lunches through Monday. Dean had already left for work. I was cleaning up, putting the containers in the fridge, running the sink. It was late. I remember looking at the microwave clock and seeing 2:14 a.m. and thinking I'd stayed up too long again that I'd be dragging through Thursday. The intercom buzzed. It's a specific sound. If you've ever lived in a building with one of these old systems, you know it. It's not a ring, it's not a chime, it's this flat, mechanical buzz that vibrates through the wall-mounted handset. and because the handset is old and loose in its cradle, the whole thing rattles slightly. It's an ugly sound even during the day. At 2 in the morning, in a quiet apartment with the only light coming from the kitchen, it's the kind of sound that makes you set down whatever you're holding and just stand there for a second. I didn't answer it. I figured someone hit the wrong button. Or a drunk person was leaning on the panel downstairs. It happened in the neighborhood. Not often, but it happened. It buzzed again. 30 seconds later, same flat, rattling drone. I walked to the handset. It's mounted in our little entryway right next to the front door. I picked it up and said hello. Nothing. Not static, not breathing, not background noise. Just nothing. A dead open line, like the connection was live, but there was no one on the other end producing any sound at all. I said hello again. Waited maybe 5 seconds. Then I hung up and went to bed. That was it. The whole event lasted less than 2 minutes, and by the time I was brushing my teeth, I'd filed it under weird but whatever and moved on. It happened again 4 nights later. A Sunday, 2:20-something a.m. I was in bed this time, not quite asleep, scrolling my phone with the brightness down low. The buzz cut through the apartment and I lay there and listened to it. It went twice, same as before. 2 buzzes, maybe 30 seconds apart. I did not get up. I did not answer it. I rolled over and went to sleep, and in the morning it felt like barely anything at all. The third time was the following Friday, 2:08 a.m. This time I was asleep, and the buzz woke me. And there's a different quality to being woken up by an intercom in a dark apartment versus hearing it while you're already awake. My heart was going. Not pounding, just elevated. I lay in bed and it buzzed again and I waited, and it didn't buzz a third time and I lay there for a while not sleeping, looking at the ceiling, and eventually I did sleep, and in the morning I mentioned it to Dean. He was eating cereal at the counter, still in his work clothes. I said something like, "Hey, has the intercom been going off in the morning when you get back?" Because his shift ended at 7, and I thought maybe someone was buzzing to be let in around that time and I was sleeping through it. Dean shook his head. "No, why?" I told him about the late-night buzzes. He frowned. Not alarmed, just processing. "Probably someone drunk," he said, "or kids. 3 times in 2 weeks, though. Could be a short in the system. That wiring's ancient. Ask Paul." I texted Paul later that day. He wrote back in his typical style. No punctuation, partial sentences. "Intercom fine, I check next week, nobody else complain." That was that, or should have been, but I want to be clear about something here because it matters for what comes later. I was not obsessing over this. I was not lying awake in fear. I was mildly annoyed the way you'd be mildly annoyed by a car alarm that goes off on your block at odd hours. It was a nuisance, not a mystery. I want you to understand that, because I need you to understand how gradually the texture of it changed. Through the rest of March and into April, the buzzing continued. Not every night. Maybe twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Always after 2 a.m., always 2 buzzes, spaced about 30 seconds apart, and then silence. I answered it 2 more times during this stretch. Both times, deadline. Open connection, no sound. I started sleeping with earplugs, which mostly solved the problem from a practical standpoint. Dean, on his nights off, he had Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Said he heard it once, but thought it was a dream. What changed things was a conversation in the lobby. The Gramercy's lobby is generous for a building its size. There's a little area with 2 old chairs and a fake plant near the mailboxes. Nobody ever sits in the chairs. But the mailboxes are a social space in the way that mailboxes are in older buildings. You check your mail, someone else is checking their mail. You nod, you talk about the weather or the hot water or whatever. The woman I talked to was named Sandra Okafor. 5th floor, 5D. She'd lived in the building longer than almost anyone. 9 years, maybe 10. Mid-40s, worked as a school administrator, kept to herself in a way that was friendly but boundaried. We'd exchange maybe 20 words a week on average. But that day in early April, she was standing at the mailboxes with her keys in her hand and this expression on her face like she wanted to say something but was deciding whether it was worth the effort. I said hi. She said hi. Then she said, "Are you the one buzzing the building at night?" I blinked. "No, you're hearing it too?" "Twice this week, 3 in the morning, 2:30, around there. For me, it's been going on since March." She looked at me for a long moment. Sandra had a very level gaze, the kind you develop from years of dealing with teenagers and parents simultaneously. "It's not random," she said. "It rang my unit specifically. My label isn't even in the slot anymore. I took it out 2 years ago." That detail landed. Because here's the thing about the intercom panel downstairs. To buzz a specific unit, you press that unit's button. The buttons are labeled by number. 4A, 5D, whatever. Whether or not there's a name in the label slot, the button is still there and still works. So someone was pressing specific buttons, choosing specific apartments. "Did you answer it?" I asked. "Once. There was no one there." "Same." We stood in the lobby for a few more minutes talking about it. Sandra said she'd asked her neighbor in 5C, a guy named Terrence, and he hadn't heard anything, but his intercom might be broken. Half of them were. She said she'd thought about calling Paul. I told her I already had and relayed his response. "Paul won't do anything unless the boiler explodes," she said, which was the most accurate summary of our landlord I'd ever heard. I went upstairs feeling differently about the situation than I had 20 minutes earlier. Not scared, but the geometry of it had changed. This wasn't a malfunction. Someone was standing at the front entrance of our building, after 2 a.m., pressing intercom buttons for occupied units, and then saying nothing when answered. That's a person making a choice. Multiple choices, actually. To come to the building, to pick a button, to wait, to press it again, to remain silent, and then to leave. That sequence of decisions is what shifted things for me. A malfunction is annoying. A person doing something deliberate and unexplained is a different category entirely. I talked to Dean about it again that evening. He was more engaged this time. "Could be someone casing the building," he said. He was tying his shoes, getting ready for his shift. Seeing who's home, who buzzes back, what hours people are awake. For 2 months? I don't know, that does seem long for that. Should we call the cops? He looked at me. We both knew what calling the cops about a buzzing intercom would sound like. We'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know the response time for actual crimes, let alone someone pressing a doorbell. "Put tape over the button," Dean said, "or disconnect the handset. What if you forget your key? I'll text you." As I sleep through texts, that's the whole point of having the intercom. We went back and forth like this. Eventually, we agreed to leave it for now and see if it continued. This is how most decisions about mildly threatening things get made when you're busy and tired and the rent is cheap. You wait and see. You absorb it into the routine. May was quiet. I mean that literally. The buzzing stopped. 2 full weeks without a single incident. I almost forgot about it. Sandra and I crossed paths in the lobby once, and she said it had stopped for her too. We shared the particular relief of a problem that resolves itself. And I took my earplugs out and slept normally, and the whole thing became an anecdote, the kind you'd tell at a bar. Yeah, for like 2 months someone kept buzzing our building at 3 in the morning. Weird, right? Stopped eventually. Then June came. The first night it came back, it was different. Not the sound. The sound was the same. The flat mechanical buzz, the rattle of the handset in the cradle. But instead of 2 buzzes in silence, it went 4 times. spaced evenly, 30 seconds apart. 2:11 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Dean was home because it was his night off, asleep in the living room on the pull-out couch, and the buzzing woke both of us. I heard him swear from the other room. I got up and went to the handset and picked it up. For the first time, there was sound on the other end. Not a voice. Not exactly. It was. And I'm going to try to describe this accurately because it matters. It was the sound of someone's mouth being very close to the intercom speaker outside. I could hear breath, but it wasn't breathing in the way you'd normally describe it. It was the ambient sound of an open mouth near a microphone. Wet, slightly resonant. Like the inside of someone's throat was a small room I was hearing the acoustics of. I said, "Who is this?" The sound continued unchanged, no response to my voice at all. "Hey, who's down there?" Dean appeared in the entryway, squinting, hair flattened on one side. "Is someone there?" I held the handset out so he could hear. He leaned in, listened. His face did something complicated. Confusion, disgust, concentration. "Hang up," he said. I did. We stood in the entryway looking at each other. "That was someone's mouth," Dean said. "Yeah. Just open, just their mouth." "Yeah." What the hell? Neither of us went back to sleep quickly. Dean went to the window in the living room that overlooks the street and the building entrance. He looked for a while. The street was empty. Whoever had been at the intercom was gone. The next morning, Dean brought it up first. "I want to see who it is," he said. He was eating toast, standing at the counter the way he always did. Dean never sat down to eat, one of his many small peculiarities. "We should set something up." "Like a camera?" "I've got the old Wise cam from when we tried to catch that package thief. I can set it up in the lobby, point it at the front door, run it on motion detection. Paul will take it down." "Paul doesn't go in the lobby. When's the last time you saw Paul in the lobby?" He had a point. I'd maybe seen Paul inside the building twice in 6 years. He managed everything by text and by sending his nephew, a quiet 20-year-old named David, to handle repairs. Dean set up the camera that evening before he left for work. He mounted it on top of the mailbox cluster, angled toward the front entrance and the intercom panel. The lens was small, dark, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. He connected it to an app on both our phones. For 5 nights, nothing. The intercom was silent. The camera captured the usual lobby traffic, tenants coming and going. A delivery driver, David the nephew, replacing a light bulb in the stairwell. Normal life in a building that had plenty of it. On the 6th night, a Monday, Dean's night off again. The intercom buzzed at 2:33 a.m., 3 times. We were both awake because we'd been watching a movie and it had run late. The buzz killed the atmosphere of the apartment immediately, like someone had opened a door to a colder room. Dean grabbed his phone and opened the camera app. I came around behind him to look at the screen. The lobby was empty. The intercom buzzed again, a 4th time. We could hear it physically through the handset on the wall and simultaneously see on the phone screen that there was nobody standing at the panel downstairs. "That's not possible," Dean said. But he said it calmly. Dean processes things calmly and then panics later privately. It's his pattern. "Could someone reach the panel from outside?" I said, "without being in frame?" "No, look at the angle. The camera sees the whole entrance area." He was right. The panel was directly beside the front door, in a small alcove. The camera's field of view covered the entire alcove and several feet beyond it. If someone was pressing our button, they would be visible. But no one was there. The buzzing stopped. We replayed the motion capture footage from the last few minutes. The camera had triggered. It had detected motion, which is why it was recording. but in the footage, the lobby was empty. The motion that triggered the recording appeared to be a very slight shift in the lighting near the intercom panel. A flicker, almost. Like something had moved past the overhead fluorescent too quickly to resolve into a shape. Dean set the camera to continuous recording after that. Over the next 2 weeks, it happened 3 more times. Always after 2. Always the same. The intercom would buzz our unit, and Sandra told me hers was going off too, on some of the same nights. And the camera would show nothing. Empty lobby. The motion sensor would trigger, and the footage would show that subtle lighting shift, that quick dimming near the panel, and nothing else. I want to pause here and be honest about where my head was at during this period, because I think it's important. I was not thinking ghosts. I was not thinking paranormal activity. I was thinking about the intercom wiring, about whether the system could short in a way that buzzed specific units, and about whether the camera had a blind spot we weren't seeing, about whether someone had figured out how to trigger the intercom remotely. Like the wiring ran through the walls, right? What if someone had accessed it from the basement? These were the kinds of explanations I was turning over. Dean was doing the same thing, more systematically. He pulled up wiring diagrams for the intercom model, an old Newtone system from 1974. He found the manual online. He traced the wiring path through the building's blueprints, which Paul's nephew David had given us access to for an unrelated issue the year before. What Dean found was that the intercom wiring ran from the panel in the lobby up through a conduit in the east wall of the building, branching off at each floor to connect to the individual unit handsets. The wiring ran through the basement on its way from the panel to the conduit. There was a junction box in the basement where the main line split. Someone could trigger the buzzers from the junction box, Dean said one afternoon, showing me the diagram on his laptop. You wouldn't even need the panel, you'd just need to complete the circuit at the junction. So, someone's going into the basement. Maybe. In our building, after 2 a.m., to buzz apartments. It doesn't make sense as a motive, Dean agreed. But the mechanism works. We told Sandra. She came up to our apartment the first time she'd ever been inside it. And Dean walked her through what he'd found. She sat in our one good chair and listened and asked precise questions and then said, "So, we checked the basement." I was thinking the same thing, Dean said. When? Tonight, I'll stay up. If the intercom goes off, I go straight down. I'm coming with you, Sandra said. Me too, I said, though I want to be honest. My enthusiasm was moderate. That night, the 3 of us stayed in our apartment. Sandra brought coffee from her place and a flashlight. A serious one, the kind that could light up a parking lot. Dean had his phone with the camera app open. I had nothing. I just sat on the couch and waited, which I think was an accurate representation of my contribution to the operation. At 2:47 a.m., the intercom buzzed. We moved fast. Dean went first, Sandra behind him, me behind her. We took the stairs because the elevator was slow and loud. 4 flights down in a stairwell that was dim and cold and smelled the way it always smelled, like paint and still air. And then through the ground floor hallway past the lobby into the basement door, which was supposed to be locked but had been broken for as long as I'd lived there. Dean opened it. Sandra's flashlight beam cut into the dark below. The basement of the Gramercy is unfinished. Concrete floor, cinder block walls, exposed pipes and ductwork overhead. Paul uses part of it for storage. There are old appliances down there, a water heater, some filing cabinets. The rest is just space. Dark, cool, low-ceilinged space that extends under the full footprint of the building. I'd been down there exactly once before, to help David move a dryer. We went down the stairs. Sandra swept the flashlight in a slow arc. The basement was empty, as far as we could see. The junction box should be on the east wall, Dean said. Past the storage area. We walked. Our footsteps echoed in a flat, damp way. Sandra's flashlight found the storage area. The appliances, the water heater, a stack of paint cans. Past that, the basement opened up into a longer stretch with nothing in it except pipes overhead and a few support columns. The junction box was on the east wall, right where the blueprint said it would be. A gray metal box, maybe a foot square, mounted at chest height. Dean went to it and opened it. Inside was a mess of old wiring. Thicker gauge than modern stuff. Cloth insulated, the kind of thing that makes electricians wince. He traced the wires with his phone flashlight while Sandra held hers on the box. "Nobody's tampered with this," he said after a minute. "This hasn't been touched in years. Look at the dust." He was right. The inside of the junction box had a uniform layer of fine gray dust on every surface. No fingerprints, no clean spots where someone had handled the wires. If someone was triggering the intercom from this junction, they weren't doing it by physically touching it. Sandra's flashlight had drifted while Dean was examining the box. She was scanning the rest of the east wall, slowly, in that methodical way she did everything. The beam moved across cinder block, across a pipe, across a gap between two sections of wall where the blocks hadn't been fully mortared, across. "Stop," I said. She brought the light back. The gap in the wall, where the mortar between two cinder blocks had crumbled away. There was a space maybe 6 inches wide, a foot tall. Not a hole exactly, more an absence. And in that absence, set back a few inches into the wall cavity, there was something. Sandra steadied the light. Dean came over. It was paper. A piece of paper folded wedged into the cavity between the cinder blocks. Old paper. Yellowed, soft-looking. Dean reached in and pulled it out. He unfolded it carefully, and the three of us looked at it in the combined light of Sandra's flashlight and Dean's phone. It was a list. Handwritten, in ballpoint pen, in small, precise capital letters. A list of unit numbers: 4A, 5D, 2C, 6F, 3B, 7A. 4A was us. 5D was Sandra. Below the unit numbers, in the same handwriting, was a single line. "Do not answer the intercom after 2 a.m. We stood there. The basement was silent around us in the way that only below-ground spaces are silent. That particular absorption of sound that makes you aware of your own breathing. "Who wrote this?" Sandra said. Nobody answered because nobody knew. Dean turned the paper over. The back was blank. He held it up to the light looking for watermarks or impressions or anything else. Just paper, just ink. "These are all occupied units," Sandra said, looking at the list again. 2C is Mrs. Petrosian. 6F. I think that's the couple who moved in last year. 3B is empty, though, has been for a while. 3B is not empty, Dean said. We both looked at him. "I've seen someone in the hall, on 3. A few times, coming back from work in the morning. Older guy, gray hair, never said anything to me. I assumed he was in 3B because he was always near that door." "I've never seen anyone like that," I said. "You're asleep when I get home." This detail. Dean seeing someone I hadn't. Both of us in the same building, living on different schedules, constructing different maps of who existed around us, unsettled me in a way that the intercom buzzing hadn't. It made me realize how partial my knowledge of my own building was. How many people might be moving through the hallways at hours I never witnessed, living routines that never intersected with mine. We took the note upstairs. Sandra went back to her apartment. Dean and I sat at the kitchen counter and looked at the note and talked about it and didn't reach any conclusions. The handwriting wasn't familiar. The paper could have been there for years, or for days. The basement's conditions were stable enough that aging would be hard to judge. "Someone who lives here wrote this," Dean said. "Or someone who lived here. As a warning? Or instructions? Instructions for who? He didn't answer. He went to bed. I sat up for another hour, looking at the note, reading the line over and over. Do not answer the intercom after 2 a.m. It was a directive. It assumed knowledge. It assumed the reader would understand what it referred to, would already have experienced the buzzing. It was written by someone who knew. The next day, I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I knocked on doors. Not all of them. I wasn't going to knock on 48 units, but I hit the ones on the list. Mrs. Petrosian in 2C, an elderly Armenian woman who'd been in the building since the 80s. The couple in 6F, whose names turned out to be Josh and Mira. And 7A, which was occupied by a man named Gareth who worked from home doing something with databases. Mrs. Petrosian invited me in for tea and told me, in heavily accented English, that her intercom had not worked in 4 years, and she was very happy about this. When I asked if she'd heard buzzing at night, she said no. When I showed her the note, she looked at the list of unit numbers and shook her head. I don't know this, she said, but this building has always had strangeness. Noises in the walls. The elevator going to floors nobody pressed. I don't pay attention anymore. She said it without fear, with the specific weariness of someone who has lived somewhere for decades and has metabolized its oddities into background noise. Josh and Mira had heard the buzzing. Twice. They'd assumed it was a malfunction. When I showed them the note, Mira took a photo of it with her phone and Josh said, "That's creepy," in a way that was more interested than alarmed. They'd moved from a bigger city and seemed to have a higher threshold for what constituted a real problem. Gareth in 7A didn't answer his door. I tried 3B. The unit dean had seen the gray-haired man near. No answer there either. I pressed my ear to the door, which I realize is a strange thing to do, but the conversation with Dean had left me curious. I heard nothing inside. The door was like every other door in the building. Beige, scuffed, a peephole at eye level, a number plate that read 3B in adhesive digits. That night, I tried something different. When the intercom buzzed, 2:19 a.m., 3 times. I answered it, I picked up the handset and I didn't speak, I just listened. The mouth sound was there again, that wet, close, open mouth presence. But this time, underneath it, so faint I almost wasn't sure I was hearing it, there was something else. A rhythm. Not speech, not breathing, but a pattern. Like they were forming words but not voicing them. I listened for maybe 15 seconds, then clearly in the background. Not from the mouth that was close to the speaker but from somewhere behind or beyond it. I heard a door close. A heavy door, the front door of the building, the one that locked automatically. The mouth sound stopped. The line went dead. I went to the window, looked down at the street. Empty. But the front door of the Gramercy was directly below me, under the awning, and my angle was wrong. I couldn't see the entrance itself, only the sidewalk extending away from it in both directions. If someone had exited the building, they'd walked in a direction I couldn't see, or they'd moved fast enough to clear my sight line. But here's what registered. The door. The front door. Closing. Which meant whatever was at the intercom was inside the building when the door closed. Either they'd been inside and left, or they'd been outside and entered. The front door only opens with a key or when someone buzzes you in. The intercom panel is outside the door. If someone was using the panel and then a door closed, that might mean someone else opened the door from inside. Or it might mean the person at the panel had a key. Or it might mean they were inside all along, and the sound I was hearing on the intercom wasn't coming from the panel at the front entrance. That thought, that the sound might not be coming from where I assumed it was coming from, is the one that kept me awake the rest of the night. Dean and I talked about it the next afternoon. I told him what I'd heard, the mouth sound, the door. my uncertainty about the direction of things. "The intercom is a closed circuit," he said. "Panel to units, that's it. You can't call a unit from inside the building on that system. Unless someone wired it differently. You'd need access to the junction box, and we saw nobody's touched it. So, what if there's more wiring than what's on the blueprints?" Dean paused. He had his laptop open to the wiring diagrams. He looked at them the way he looks at server logs at work. Not reading, scanning for anomalies. "The blueprints are from 1974, he said. "They're the original construction documents. If someone added wiring later, it wouldn't show up. Could you trace the wires from the junction box? See where they actually go?" "In theory, but they're inside the walls." "Some of them would be in the basement, though, before they go into the walls." He nodded slowly. "I could look. I'd need to follow the conduit." "I'll come with you." "Bring Sandra." I texted Sandra. She responded in 2 minutes tomorrow morning. "I'm free until 11. The next morning, a Saturday, the three of us went back down to the basement. This time felt different from the first visit. The first time, we'd been curious, a little nervy, playing detective in our own building. This time, Dean had a purpose and tools: a flashlight, a multimeter, a screwdriver. Sandra had her big flashlight again. I carried my phone with the camera app open, though I didn't expect to see anything on it. Dean started at the junction box. He identified the main feed from the panel, a pair of wires in cloth insulation that ran up into the conduit in the east wall. Then he identified the branch wires that split off to each floor. 6 pairs of wires per floor, 1 for each unit. Standard. Then he started counting. "There are extra wires," he said about 10 minutes in. He'd pulled a section of the conduit cover off. It was just a metal channel screwed into the wall, easy to open. Inside, among the bundled wiring, there were additional lines, thinner than the original intercom wires, insulated in white plastic instead of cloth. "How many extra?" Sandra asked. "I'm counting." He traced them with his fingers, separating them from the bundle. 6. 6 extra wires. They run up into the conduit with the others. "Where do they go?" Dean followed the conduit upward until it disappeared into the ceiling, into the floor of the ground level. "I can't trace them past here without opening up walls. Can you tell if they're connected to the junction box?" He went back to the box, checked each connection. "No, they bypass the junction entirely. They come from..." He crouched, following the wires downward from the conduit, along the wall toward the floor. They ran along the base of the cinder block wall, tucked into the corner where wall met floor, almost invisible if you weren't looking for them. They ran south away from the junction box, away from the east wall, toward the back of the basement. We followed them. Sandra's flashlight tracked the wires along the floor as they ran straight for about 30 feet and then turned a corner around a support column. Past the column, the basement extended into a section I hadn't been in before. Farther back than the storage area. Farther back than I'd thought the basement went. The ceiling was lower here. The pipes overhead were thicker, older, and some of them were wrapped in material that I'm fairly sure was asbestos insulation, the kind they stopped using decades ago. The wires ran to a door. Not a door like the basement door upstairs. A metal door set into the cinder block wall, painted the same gray as the wall, with no handle on the outside. Just a keyhole. Old, small, the kind that takes a skeleton key. The door was flush with the wall and the same color, and if you weren't following the wires directly to it, you might not notice it at all. In fact, I was fairly sure that during my one previous visit to the basement, I had not come back this far, and even if I had, I would have walked right past it. The wires disappeared under the door, through a gap between the bottom of the door and the floor. Dean tried the door. Locked. He put his eye to the keyhole, but it was dark on the other side and he couldn't see anything. He knocked on the door. 3 firm knocks. And we all stood there and listened. Nothing came back. "We need this open," Sandra said. "We need to talk to Paul," I said. "Paul doesn't know what's in his own building," Dean said, which was unkind but probably accurate. We went back upstairs and I called Paul. He answered on the 4th ring, which was quick for him. I asked about the door in the basement. There was a pause. "What door?" he said. I described it. The back section of the basement, the gray metal door, the keyhole. "That's the old maintenance room," he said. "From when the building had a super. Been locked since before my father died. Do you have the key?" "Somewhere, maybe. Why?" "We found wiring running into it. Extra wiring that's connected to the intercom system. We've been having problems with the intercoms going off at night." Another pause, longer. "I sent David. Tomorrow, maybe Monday, he'll look at it. Can you come yourself? We'd like to show you what we found. I'm in Erie this weekend. David come." He hung up. I texted David directly. I had his number from the last time he'd come to fix our bathroom faucet. He said he could come Sunday afternoon. David arrived at 2 on Sunday, looking exactly the way David always looked. Slightly confused, slightly apologetic, like he'd been interrupted in the middle of something but was too polite to mention it. He's a good kid, quiet, competent enough with basic repairs but visibly out of his depth with anything that involved history or context. We took him to the basement, all 4 of us. Me, Dean, Sandra, David. Sandra led the way with her flashlight. When we reached the back section and showed David the door, he stared at it. "I've never been back here," he said. "Did your uncle give you a key?" He shook his head. He tried the door, locked, same as before. He knelt and looked at the keyhole. "I could probably pick this," Dean said. He'd been watching YouTube videos about lockpicking all weekend, which was both impressive and concerning. "Don't," David said. "My uncle will kill me. Let me call him." He called Paul. The conversation was in Polish, so I didn't follow most of it, but David's tone was deferential and Paul's voice, audible through the phone speaker, was irritated. Eventually, David hung up. He says there's a box of old keys in the storage area. Filing cabinet, bottom drawer. We found the filing cabinet. The bottom drawer was stiff, rusted, and took Dean and me both pulling to get it open. Inside was a metal box, and inside the box was a collection of keys that looked like they belonged in a museum. Old brass and iron keys, skeleton keys, small keys, keys with tags and keys without. Maybe 30 of them, loose, jangling. We took the box to the door. David tried keys one at a time, patiently, while the rest of us watched. On the 14th key, a small iron skeleton key with a square bow. The lock turned. David pulled the door open. The room beyond was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, same cinder block walls, same concrete floor. Low ceiling with a single light fixture. A bare bulb socket with a pull chain. Dean reached in and pulled the chain. The bulb was dead. Sandra's flashlight filled the space, and we all saw what was in there. A chair, an old wooden chair, the kind you'd find in a school or a church basement, facing the far wall. On the far wall, mounted at seated eye level, was an intercom handset, identical to the ones in our apartments. Same beige plastic, same coiled cord, same wall mount bracket. But this one was not part of the original system, the wiring. The white plastic insulated wiring we'd traced from the conduit ran down the wall and into the back of the handset. And on the wall next to the handset, taped with yellowed Scotch tape, was another piece of paper. Same handwriting as the note we'd found in the wall cavity. Same small, precise capitals. Dean stepped into the room and shone his phone light on the paper. Sandra followed. I stayed in the doorway. David stayed behind me. I could hear him breathing. The paper had a list, not unit numbers this time. Names. I'm not going to write all of them because some of them I didn't recognize and some of them I want to protect. But the first name on the list was Kaminsky, my aunt's married name. The name's still on our intercom label. Below the names. There were 9 of them, was a second line in the same handwriting. They answer when they shouldn't. Find out which ones still do. Sandra read it out loud. Her voice was flat, controlled. The same voice she probably used when delivering bad news to parents at school. Someone's been testing us, she said. Buzzing us after 2 to see who picks up. From in here, Dean said. He was looking at the handset on the wall. This handset is wired into the intercom system, but it's not on the original circuit. Someone added it. Someone spliced into the conduit and ran separate lines to specific units, the ones on the list. When? I said. Could be years ago, decades even. The Scotch tape is ancient. David spoke from behind me. I need to call my uncle. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard from him before. Not fear exactly, but a kind of firmness, a boundary being drawn. He stepped back from the doorway. I'm going to call my uncle. Nobody should touch anything else. He went upstairs. The 3 of us stayed. Dean was examining the handset, not touching it, just looking. If I picked this up and buzzed a unit, he said, someone upstairs would hear their intercom go off, and they'd answer, and I'd hear them on this handset. They'd think I was at the front entrance, but I'd be down here. Someone was sitting in this chair, Sandra said, in the dark, in the basement, calling apartments in the middle of the night. And listening, I said. Listening to whoever answered. Why? Nobody answered. We left the room. Dean pulled the door closed but didn't lock it. The key was still in the lock. We went upstairs to the lobby, where David was on the phone, pacing. His conversation had shifted to English. Found a room, yes, with a chair and an intercom. It's wired into the building. No, I don't know who. Uncle, I think we need to... He listened. His face tightened. Okay, yes. He hung up and looked at us. My uncle is coming back from Erie tonight. He says, don't go back down there. He says he needs to see it himself. Did he know about the room? Sandra asked. He says no. He says the maintenance room was just storage. He's never been in it. Does he know about the extra wiring? David hesitated. He didn't answer that directly. Paul arrived late that night. I know because I heard the front door. I'd become very attuned to the sound of the front door, and went to the window and saw his car parked out front. A dirty white sedan he'd had for as long as I'd known him. He didn't come up to talk to us. He went, I assume, directly to the basement. I fell asleep waiting for him to come up. He never did. In the morning, I texted him. No response. I texted David. David responded, my uncle is handling it. He asked that you don't go back to the basement for now. I showed Dean. He made a face. Something about this bothers me, he said. Everything about this bothers me. No, I mean Paul's reaction. He's not surprised enough. He's not calling the police. Someone secretly wired his building and set up a room in the basement, and he just drives back from Erie and goes down there alone. Maybe he's just dealing with it his way. His way is usually to send David and ignore the problem. Dean was right. Paul's behavior didn't fit his pattern. Paul was a man who delegated everything, complained about everything, and treated the building as a burden he'd inherited rather than a thing he actively managed. The idea of Paul driving 3 hours at night to personally investigate a mysterious room was dissonant. The next 2 days were strange. Paul didn't respond to texts from any of us. Not me, not Dean, not Sandra. David's responses became shorter and vaguer. Uncle is handling it. Please be patient. Don't go to basement. On Wednesday, Sandra knocked on our door at 7 in the evening. She had her phone in her hand and an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Genuinely unsettled. "The door is gone," she said. "What?" "The basement door, to the room. I went down to check. The door is gone. The wall is patched. Cinder blocks, fresh mortar. It's sealed up. Dean and I went down with her." She was right. Where the door had been, there was now a section of new cinder block, clearly different from the surrounding wall. The blocks were cleaner, the mortar lighter. If you didn't know a door had been there, you might not question it. Just a patched section of basement wall, but we knew the outline was the same shape. "Paul did this," Dean said, "or had it done. In 2 days? It's not that much masonry. A guy with a truck in a few hours." "Why would he seal it?" "Because he doesn't want anyone to see what's in there." "Or because he wants to make sure whatever it is stops," I said, trying for the more reasonable interpretation. "If that were the case," Sandra said, "he'd talk to us. He'd explain. He'd at least text back." That night, I called Paul again. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. Calm, clear, direct. "Paul, it's my name. In 4A, we saw the wall. We need to talk about what's going on. Please call me back." He didn't call back. Thursday night, 2:07 a.m. The intercom buzzed. I was in bed, half asleep. The sound hit me differently now. Before, it had been an annoyance, then a mystery, then a project. Now, it was something else. Now, it was specific. I knew there was a room in my building's basement, sealed now, but it had existed, where someone had sat in a chair in the dark and called my apartment through a hidden handset and listened. And whatever Paul had done to the room, the buzzing hadn't stopped. I did not answer. It buzzed again and again, 4 times. Then silence. I lay in the dark and thought about the note. "Do not answer the intercom after 2 a.m., written by someone who knew, maybe written by someone who'd answered and learned why you shouldn't. Maybe written by the person who'd been doing the calling, as a test to see who would obey and who wouldn't. They answer when they shouldn't. Find out which ones still do. Find out which ones still do. Still do what? Still answer. Still live here? Still exist?" I was turning the language over in my mind, trying to parse it, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Dean. He was at work. Did the intercom just go off? Camera caught something. I opened the camera app. Dean had set it to continuous recording, and it was still running in the lobby, still aimed at the front entrance. I scrubbed back to 2:07 a.m. and watched. The lobby was empty, same as always, the same fluorescent light, the same mailboxes, the same fake plant. The intercom panel by the front door undisturbed. But at 2:07:12, the timestamp matched. The lobby light dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed. Slowly, over the course of about 2 seconds, the light level dropped, as if someone were turning a dial. The lobby went from its usual flat brightness to a murky half-light, and in that half-light I could see, or thought I could see, that the shadow on the east wall of the lobby, the wall nearest the intercom panel, had a shape to it. A human shape. Not sharp, not defined, but a region of darker shadow within the dimness that had the proportions of a person standing close to the wall. The light came back up. The shadow resolved into nothing. The wall was just a wall. At 2:07:14, the light dimmed again. The shadow was there again, closer to the panel maybe. Or the same position. Hard to tell. 2 seconds. Then the light returned. At 2:07:16, again. The dim, the shape, the return. At 2:07:18. Dim. Shape. This time I was sure it was closer to the panel. The region of shadow was denser, more defined. Not a silhouette. There was no outline, no boundary, just an area where the shadow was thicker, deeper, and it was near the panel, near where someone's hand would be if they were pressing a button. Then the light stabilized and the lobby was normal, and the footage continued and nothing else happened. I watched it 3 more times. I saved it. I sent it to Dean. He called me within a minute. "You see it?" he said. "I see it. That's not a wiring issue. No. That's not someone in the basement. No." We were both quiet for a moment. In the background of his call, I could hear the ambient hum of whatever server room or office he worked in. "I'm putting in for day shift," Dean said. "I don't want to be out of the apartment at night anymore." "Yeah. And we're done with the intercom. I'm disconnecting our handset tomorrow." "What about Sandra, Josh and Mira, the others on the list?" "I'll tell them. They can do what they want. But we're disconnecting." Dean came home the next morning and disconnected our intercom handset. He didn't just unhook it. He cut the wires at the wall and capped them. Sandra did the same to hers after he showed her how. Josh and Mira, when I talked to them, decided to leave theirs connected. Josh said something about wanting to record the audio if it happened again, for evidence. Mira looked less sure about this but didn't argue. The intercom couldn't buzz our apartment anymore. The immediate problem was solved, and for about a week things were quiet. No buzzing because we couldn't receive it, no new incidents, no contact from Paul, who still wasn't returning calls or texts. Dean put in for day shift and was told it would take a few weeks to transition. Life began to normalize, the way it does, the way it has to when the rent is $740 and you don't have anywhere else to go. Then Josh came to my door. It was a Sunday morning. I'd just gotten back from the laundromat. Josh was standing in the hallway outside 4A, and he looked wrong. Not scared. Depleted. Like he hadn't slept, and beneath the not sleeping there was something else. Something that had drained him from the inside. "Can I come in?" he said. I let him in. He sat at the counter, and I gave him water, and he drank it, and then he told me what happened. He'd been recording the intercom audio. Every night he left an app running on an old phone, connected to the handset, set to activate on sound. For 4 nights, it captured nothing. On the 5th night, the previous night, Saturday, it captured a call at 2:22 a.m. He played it for me. The recording was clear. The intercom buzz, the click of the handset being picked up by the recording app, and then the sound. The mouth sound. I recognized it immediately. The wet, close, open-mouth presence. But this recording was better quality than what I'd heard through the handset, and I could hear things I'd missed before. The mouth sound wasn't just someone's mouth open near the speaker. It was someone speaking, very, very slowly. So slowly that the individual sounds didn't register as speech in real time. Stretched out, decelerated, so that what might be a word took 30 seconds to form. The mouth opening and closing that I'd heard as a rhythm was language, played at a fraction of normal speed. Josh had realized this. He'd been up all night processing the audio. He'd used software, some audio editing program, to speed up the recording. He played me the result. Sped up to roughly 8 times normal speed, the mouth sound became a voice. A male voice, older, speaking in a flat monotone. It said, "I can hear you breathing. I know you're home. Stay on the line." Then, after a pause, "Stay on the line. I need to hear you. I need to know you're there. Stay." Then, "Don't hang up. I know you want to. Stay on the line. I can hear your apartment. I can hear inside." It repeated. The same phrases, cycling. "I need to hear you. I need to know you're there. I can hear inside." Josh stopped the playback. His hand was shaking slightly, not dramatically, just a fine tremor, the kind produced by adrenaline and no sleep. "That's a person," he said. "That's a human voice. Did you recognize it?" "No, but it's old. That's an old man talking." I thought of what Dean had said about the gray-haired man on the 3rd floor, the one he'd seen in the hallway near 3B. I told Josh this. His face didn't change, but he set his phone down on the counter in a way that was very careful, very deliberate, like he was placing something fragile. "Mira wants to move," he said. "I don't think she's wrong. Have you talked to Paul?" Paul isn't answering. I went to the address listed on our lease for his management company. It's a P.O. box. I helped Josh take the information to the police the next day. He filed a report. Harassment, unwanted contact, possible trespassing. The officer who took the report was professional and clearly unimpressed. He said they'd look into it. He said to call if anything escalated. He gave Josh a case number. It was the kind of interaction that technically constitutes official action, but practically constitutes nothing. What happened next, though, is the part I haven't been able to stop thinking about. It's the part that made me move out. It's the part that keeps me up sometimes, not every night, but often enough, looking at the ceiling and thinking. Dean disconnected our handset. I said that. Cut the wires, capped them. No signal could come through. This was verified. Dean tested it, ran a current check, confirmed the circuit was broken. 3 nights after Josh came to my door. A Wednesday, Dean's night off. Both of us home. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. to a sound. Not the intercom buzz. The intercom was disconnected. No, this was a different sound, coming from the wall where the handset used to be. The handset was gone. Dean had removed it entirely, left a small rectangular patch of bare wall where the mounting bracket had been, 2 capped wires sticking out. The sound was coming from the capped wires. Buzzing. Faintly. Not the mechanical buzz of the intercom system. Something else. A vibration in the wire itself, in the copper inside the insulation, as if current were being pushed through a line that was no longer connected to anything. I got up and went to the entryway and stood there and listened. The sound was real. Not imagined, not dreamed, not the hum of other building systems bleeding through. It was the specific frequency of the intercom, transmitted through severed wires that were connected to nothing on either end. Dean was behind me. He'd heard it too. He stood next to me and we both looked at the capped wires and listened to them buzz. "That's not possible," he said. Same words as before, in the lobby, when the camera showed no one at the panel. But this time his voice wasn't calm. This time, his voice had a crack in it. The buzzing stopped after about 30 seconds. The apartment was silent. We stood there for a while longer, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. "We're leaving," Dean said. "I don't care about the rate, I don't care about the lease. We're leaving." We started packing the next day. Sandra, when I told her, said she'd been thinking the same thing. She'd already looked at places. Josh and Mira had put in their notice the day before. Here's where I need to be honest with you about something. Leaving wasn't simple. $740 a month. In that city, for that space. With my job 3 blocks away, and Dean's hospital a 15-minute bus ride, and both of us carrying debt from our 20s and neither of us with savings worth mentioning. Leaving meant a worse apartment, a longer commute, less money for food, 100 small degradations of daily life that accrue and grind and wear you down. We knew this. We were choosing it anyway. Dean found a place in 2 weeks. A studio across town, $9.50 a month, smaller, louder, on a bus line that ran every 40 minutes instead of every 15. It was fine, it was safe, it had no intercom. On the last day, the day we moved out, I carried the final box down the stairwell and through the lobby and out the front door. It was a Saturday afternoon. Bright, clear, the kind of day that makes buildings like the Gramercy look honest about their age. I put the box in Dean's car and then went back inside because I'd left my phone charger plugged in by the bed. The lobby was empty. The camera was gone. Dean had taken it down the day before. I walked past the mailboxes and the fake plant and the intercom panel by the front door. I paused. I looked at the panel. All those little buttons, all those label slots. Most of them empty, a few with names. Names I recognize now, names from the list. Mrs. Petrosian, Gareth, others. And there, in the label slot for 3B, was a name I hadn't seen before. It wasn't there the last time I'd looked, which was maybe a week ago, freshly inserted. A small strip of paper, neatly printed. A name. I read it. I won't write it here because, after everything, I looked it up. It was the name of the building superintendent who'd worked at the Gramercy from 1974 to 1991. The man who'd occupied the maintenance room in the basement. The man who, according to the single obituary I found in a digitized newspaper archive, had died in the building in November of 1991. In the basement, in his room, in his chair. The cause of death was listed as natural. A heart attack, alone at night. Found by a tenant who noticed the smell. The name had been in the label slot for 3B, but the maintenance room was in the basement. 3B was 4 floors up, and according to the building records I pulled them after we moved, I couldn't stop. 3B had been vacant since 2019. No tenant, no lease, no occupant. But Dean had seen someone there, an older man, gray hair, near the door of 3B. Multiple mornings, in the early hours when the building was quiet and most people were asleep. I took the label out of the slot, I put it in my pocket. I went upstairs, got my charger, came back down, and walked out of the Gramercy for the last time. We've been in the new place for 4 months now. Dean got his day shift. I transferred to a different branch of my company, farther away but manageable. Sandra found a place near her school. Josh and Mira, last I heard, moved out of the city entirely. Mrs. Petrosian stayed. Gareth stayed. I don't know about the others. Paul eventually resurfaced. He sent a form letter to all previous tenants about lease termination and deposit return. He did not mention the basement. He did not mention the room, or the wiring, or any of it. The letter was signed with a stamp, not a handwritten signature. I don't go back to that neighborhood. Not deliberately. There's no reason to. But once, about 6 weeks after we moved, I was on a bus that happened to route past the Gramercy's block, and I looked out the window as we passed. The green awning was gone. The front entrance looked the same, and standing just inside the glass door, visible through the glass barely, a shape. A person standing in the lobby near the intercom panel. I couldn't make out features. The bus was moving. The angle changed. They were gone, or I'd passed them, or they'd never been there in the particular way I thought they'd been there. Dean asked me last week why I still check my phone at 2 a.m. I didn't have a good answer. I told him it was just a habit. But it's not a habit. It's that our new apartment. The studio, the safe one, the one with no intercom, has a buzzer, a modern one, by the front door. A video buzzer with a little screen. Nobody has ever buzzed it. But twice now, at 2 a.m., the screen has lit up on its own. Just for a second. The way it does when someone presses a button outside. Both times the screen showed the hallway outside our door. Empty. Both times I could swear the image wasn't quite a live feed. The angle was wrong. Slightly lower, slightly closer to the floor, like the camera wasn't mounted on the wall but held at waist height, like someone was carrying it. I haven't told Dean. I'm going to tell Dean. I need to figure out how to say it in a way that doesn't break something in him, because he's been sleeping well for the first time in months and he's been laughing more, and the dark circles under his eyes are finally gone. And I know what this information will do to those things. But I think he needs to know. Because whoever was in that chair, whoever sat in the dark and called us and listened and needed to hear us breathing, needed to know we were there. I don't think they were bound to the building. I think they were bound to the people who answered. I think when the note said, "Do not answer the intercom after 2 a.m., it wasn't protecting the building. It was protecting us, and we answered multiple times. We picked up the phone and said hello into that dead air and that patient, open mouth, and we gave them what they wanted. We let them hear us. We let them hear inside. I keep the label from the intercom panel in my wallet. The name of the dead superintendent. I take it out sometimes and look at it and think about a man who died alone in a chair in a basement, listening to people in their apartments through wires in the walls. And I wonder what he was listening for, and whether he found it, and whether finding it was what kept him there, long after the rest of him should have been gone. And I wonder. This is the thing I think about at 2 a.m., when I check my phone and the screen is dark and the hallway is empty. I wonder if listening to someone long enough through a wire in the dark creates something, a connection, a line that doesn't break when you cut the wire or seal the room or move across town. A line that runs not through copper, but through the fact that you heard each other, that you were, for a moment, in each other's silence. I don't know, maybe it's nothing. Maybe the video buzzer has a glitch, maybe the screen lights up because of a software update or a power fluctuation or any of the dozen rational explanations that exist for things like this. But I don't check the hallway when the screen lights up. I don't open the door. I don't answer. Not after 2 a.m.